AlphaFold changes everything. Super exciting. What is it? What are the highlights? Let's talk about it, please. Hi, I'm Kingdangerously. This is Ftrhstry. We're in a time vortex from the 2120s talking about the next 100 years. Okay, AlphaFold is about protein predictions. Okay, right. What are proteins? Proteins are these little molecules that make up all biological life. What is life? Is that thing you're doing right now? Okay, so you are a body made up of, you probably know, about 30 trillion cells, and each of these cells has billions of little molecules in it, most of which are proteins, okay? And proteins are made up of 20 amino acids, repeated and repeated in various orders, to the tune of about 400 each per protein. And you've got about 20,000 different kinds of these proteins in your body, repeated billions of times in all these 30 trillion cells. Right, okay, so far so good. Now, those 20,000 proteins are just a very small part of the bigger picture of proteins writ large, right? So that's 20,000, that's out of about 100 million proteins known to science in all animals, insects, little buggy-wuggy bio things like bacteria and viruses, nasty little diseases to beautiful grasses to swooping, soaring eagles. All of it's proteins, right? Now, so these proteins are very difficult to predict in a tactile shape sense, and that's because these little amino acids, some of them like each other and some of them don't like each other. So there's a lot of like attraction and repulsion going on in these chains of hundreds of amino acids. Even though there are only 20 fundamental building blocks, they're repeated in these different orders, sort of like DNA. It's got these 4 basic letters, but how you arrange them, oh my gosh, it's everything. It creates an infinite tapestry of glory and wonder and majesty. So with those 400 amino acids bending each other in various different ways, every protein has a radically different shape, and what shape it is informs directly what it can do and what can be done to it. To what sort of molecules is it especially vulnerable? To what is it resistant? What can it absorb? What will it repel? All of that is critical information if you're talking about protecting people from disease, or rectifying some genetic defect, or even doing like very physical things in the world, like cracking open a plastic bottle and dissolving it into air. You can do that if you know the shapes of the proteins that can unlock the physical objects, like, you know, a lock and a key. It's a great metaphor. It really holds up. So why are we talking about this? Because DeepMind's AlphaFold program in 2020 broke this whole scene wide open. For 50 years, there'd been an ongoing competition to figure out how to predict what a protein would do physically based on just knowing what amino acids it has. Unfortunately, it was 50 years in the making, because this was like really hard. And the previous way to do this was possible, but you could figure it out with years of experimental research. And that was like the best you could do. You had to test all the amino acids. You had to look at this stuff in the lab from every angle. Millions of dollars per protein. And again, there are 20,000 proteins just in the human body, 20,000 different kinds of protein. And then in the bigger picture, about 100 million proteins, of which science is aware in the early 2020s. Where I'm from, in the 2120s, it's a bit of a bigger playing field, because the potential variability within these proteins is absolutely humongous. I'm sure you can guess, right? Because if you can combine those 20 amino acids in any order, repeat or not repeat as many as you want, you get this potential field of possible proteins that's like significantly bigger than the number of atoms in the known universe. So the number of atoms in the known universe is around 10 to the 80th, and the number of potential protein shapes is around like 10 to the 140th, which, if you're familiar with big numbers, you know is a very big number indeed. And if you were to try to, in a lab, figure out the shapes of every protein known to science or conceivably possible, you couldn't do it in the time span of the universe. Your lab would be melting into heat death before you figured out the last one. So it's incredibly key that we've got a hack now you've got a hack in the early 2020s to guess what a protein structure is going to be without actually rigorously investigating it from a physical standpoint. Now, that's not always perfect. Not every single prediction that DeepMind has made about the shape of these proteins has been 100% accurate, but it's like 95 plus. It's pretty good. It's 3 times more accurate than the next closest competitor. It's down to an atomic scale, and it comes with an assessment from DeepMind that's basically like a confidence interval. We think this is 95% likely to be the shape of this molecule, and that's enough to go on with regards to scientific research, because it narrows the field. It allows those years and millions to be spent on very specific proteins, because you can sift through the hundreds of thousands of proteins available and choose exactly the ones that you think might break open that plastic bottle or stop that cancer or whatever else really important thing you're trying to do, whatever other important things you are no doubt trying to do because you are a scientist. So how many of these things have we got? In 2020, when AlphaFold won these CASP competition, they debuted their list of 350,000 protein shape predictions, which was a lot. It was like 200,000 more than we had on the books to begin with. So right there was a huge improvement in human scientific knowledge, and they have gracefully opened up their books and shared not only their list of proteins, but also the source code for what they're doing with AlphaFold. So anybody can go do this on their own if they want to look for specific proteins that haven't been on AlphaFold's list yet. Then a year after this debut, in 2021, they released another big list of 400,000 proteins this time. In that first list of 350,000, they included all 20,000 of the proteins that are in human bodies and all the proteins in an additional 20 organisms, just for comparison's sake and to give us a bigger picture. Then they dumped 400,000 new ones on top of that, and then in the late 2021, early 22 zone, they added another 190 plus thousand to this list, including 27 full biomes, of which 17 are just rare tropical diseases. So they fully analyzed the protein structures of 17 very pernicious, nasty, not very well-known tropical diseases that kill a lot of people. So it's like really good information to have for saving lives. Now that puts them in the 2022 phase, early 22, Q1 2022, at just under 1 million of these protein predictions. It's like 992,000 something. But in the near days ahead, in the 2020s, you're going to see them expand this number into the millions and then ultimately to the 100 million protein number, which is in the 2020s where science stands WRT proteins. That's just with regards to. So that's the number of proteins that science is aware of existing in the 2020s, which again, from the perspective of the 2120s, is adorable because there are way more proteins than that. And so bucket one of why this is so freaking exciting is that you can basically cure disease, like not a disease, but like disease writ large, because if you can analyze the shapes of any given thing that's getting in human bodies and hurting them, you can create a shape to effectively block that action, to seek it out, grab it, and take it out of circulation. It's astonishingly physical when you get right down to it. Just the brute shapes are critical. How a curve folds and where you can hook something with another molecule to pull it out of the bloodstream, to yoink it out of the cell. It's very practical, almost in like a staggering kind of sense, because it's so airy-fairy and esoteric, like a database with 1 million proteins in it and 400 amino acids, jiggly. But what it comes down to is like what hook goes on what wobble, and how can we build something to pull out a bad thing from your body or to stop it from connecting to your body in any meaningful, lasting way. So that's basket one, is we can address all of those biological invaders now that we have the tools to understand their shapes and to create shapes that will intersect with them in defensive ways. Basket number two is we can now create any protein that we can imagine. We can step back from our goal and work back toward the shape that we need. You want to break apart that plastic bottle so it's not killing tortoises or whatever, and dissolve it into oxygen, or you want to like turn the regolith of the moon into oxygen for people to breathe, or you want to like algify sewage waste into rocket fuel. Like, you can do that. All of this stuff, it's like source code for human nature, right? Which sounds a lot like what they said about DNA, and that was true then too. But DNA is not as specific. There's not as much information involved in those 4 molecules as there is in all of these proteins. So this is just like a giant step forward for humanity, and it's so big that it's really hard to yell too much about, but it is incredibly exciting. So I strongly recommend that you go look it up. Just like scroll their website a little bit. If you're in the 2020s or 2030s, I think you'll be quite pleased. In the immediate future, this means much more scientific understanding of the shape of the protein world in the 2020s. In the 2030s, it means the beginning of the end of death from disease. A real top-down, full-on victory over a problem that has tormented humanity and its predecessors for, the 20,000 years that humans have experienced recorded history, and of course the millions of years that preceded that, back to the billion. I mean, this is big stuff. This is like it's a quantum leap for humanity, and we'll look back on it from the 2120s as a special turning point in our ability to understand, predict, and interact with the world. So congratulations that you've done it. I hope you feel very proud of yourself. This is one of the most exciting scientific accomplishments of the early 2020s, and even in the 2120s, we still think it's pretty cool. Good job. Bye.